Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, it's often thought of as a girls' issue, but more and more, young men are struggling with their body image, and it's taking a toll both physically and psychologically. At what point does looking good become an unhealthy obsession? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, lots from our community about the extremes of male body image, the pressure, and the effects that it's having on a lot of really young guys.
Right. So we asked our community members what types of pressures young men are facing out there. And the responses varied from pressure to look good for girls to pressure that the media puts on them, and then by extension, pressure on the web. Yeah. Paul tweets in, "Look at the images posted all over the internet. The effect goes both to the boys and the girls. Everyone wants to look attractive." Now we'll talk during the show about what the standard for attractive is, so tweet us your comments and questions using the hashtag AJStream.
And joining us in studio is Claire Misko. She's a body image expert at the National Eating Disorders Association and the author of the book, You're Amazing, a no-pressure guide to being your best self. Claire is also a speaker and consultant on body image issues and outreach. Claire, it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. We've also got a great group of guests in our Google Hangout today. Of course, you too can be in the stream. Just click on that link below and add us to your circles. And by the way, here are some of the hashtags we're following. When we think about negative body image, what comes up most often is how women strive for perfection, hair, makeup, body size. But today, reports show that more boys are concerned with how they look. And it's all about being toned and muscular, which on its surface doesn't seem all that bad. But last year, the journal Pediatrics released a study in which more than a third of the boys surveyed used protein powders and 6% reported using steroids. And the average age of the boys interviewed for that study was just 14 years old. So a lot of this pressure to be lean and muscular obviously comes from the media. Take a look at some U.S. men's magazine covers. It's really hard to find one that doesn't show off a buff body or a celebrity that's become the latest role model for perfection. A media organization called Common Sense Media produced this video warning about the rise in the number of boys striving for that physical ideal.
From an early age, boys receive the message that being a man and being strong go hand in hand. Just think, Halloween superhero costumes are padded to make young kids look like they have six-pack abs. And as they grow older and sports become an even bigger deal, the pressure to man up can sometimes lead to crash diets, over-exercising, or even taking dangerous supplements.
Here's a website we found. It's called T-Nation. It actually stands for Testosterone Nation. And on it, they say they're dedicated to helping you build a bigger, stronger, and better performing muscle. Of course, that raises the point that there's a bigger and deeper issue here, like the use of dietary supplements and steroids and things that can be physically dangerous to these young guys. And of course, these sort of obsessions then can also lead to psychological issues like extreme dieting. So to help break all of this down, we're joined on Skype by Niobe Way, a professor in developmental psychology at New York University. And in our Google Plus Hangout, we have Alan Aragon, a nutrition expert who designs food programs for professional athletes and Olympians and is the nutrition advisor for Men's Health magazine. Ryan Salonen, he's an actor and he lives in Los Angeles, California. Simon Metten is a medical student at Cambridge University in the UK. He was actually featured in the 2007 BBC documentary, I'm a Boy Anorexic. And Matt Wetzel is an activist for eating disorder issues and a regular participant with the Eating Disorders Coalition. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Niobe, you know, you've been working with boys and young men on these issues for 20 years. What are some of the extremes that you're seeing in boys reporting these self-esteem and self-image problems?
Yeah, so basically I see two things going on. One is that
boys are definitely striving for that perfection that you referred to earlier, and perfection particularly around being a man and looking like a man, looking like a real man. And looking like a real man means not looking like a woman. And so since fat and any kind of chubbiness is associated oftentimes with a more feminine, weak look, there's a real compulsion among boys to look like real men, which means having no body fat, having nothing extra on their bodies. The other thing I find in listening to boys for the past 20 years is that there's just an enormous amount of loneliness and isolation going on among boys who are desperately wanting to connect to other boys, to girls, even to moms and dads. And we, at the moment, we live in sort of a global culture that discourages that kind of intimacy connection especially between boys. And so it's their desire in some ways, their perfection is not only rooted in their desire to be a man, but also to try to fit in with other boys and ultimately connect to other boys. But the sad part is that the way they're connecting is obviously very harmful for them.
Claire, what age range are we talking about here predominantly?
Well, eating disorders really affect people of all ages. Eating disorders and poor body image do not discriminate. These are issues that are equal opportunity issues. We see girls and women suffering. We see boys and men suffering.
But in the context here with what we were just talking about with Niobe, I mean, are we talking about like 13, 14-year-old boys? Do you see guys that young?
Yes, of course. Yeah. We see young boys who are already feeling that pressure. And Niobe brought up a very good point about the loneliness and isolation factor. That can be a cause, and it can also be a real obstacle for young men and men of all ages to reach out for help. There is this real barrier there, a real resistance to admitting any kind of vulnerability, and therefore a lot of men really are very resistant to reach out for help, and especially because these issues are still unfortunately very much defined as girls' and women's issues. So there's that stigma there, which is a real obstacle.
Well, you mentioned the reluctance to reach out because of the stigma. Nicholas Slayton tweets in, "Fitness and good health aren't bad. People should strive to be fit, but stigmas against those who aren't fit from those who are bad." And then we're also getting responses to our question, what body image issues do young men face? Patrick says there are lots. There seems to be a callous disregard for the body image pressures that young men face, and rampant steroid abuse is one of them. Alan, I want to go to you in our Google Plus Hangout. You are a nutrition guru and also a nutrition advisor for Men's Health magazine. What do you tell clients when they come to you with things that are quite simply unachievable and unattainable goals?
Well, I pretty much tell them exactly that. I let them know that the six-pack abs that you see on the cover of magazines and in various online media, they're largely the product of winning the genetic lottery. And if not winning the genetic lottery by itself, then it's a combination of extremely favorable genetics plus some pharmacological help as well. So there's a wide range of people who approach me with various goals, and depending on just how far off the mark they are is how much I have to work to kind of bring them back into reality.
So, Niobe, for a lot of people in our audience today, this is a new topic when we're talking about young men and boys with these body image issues. Are they the same issues that girls and women deal with, and do they manifest in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, the remarkable thing is that the fundamental issue are really the same. It's about wanting to fit in. It's about wanting to try to look normal, look like a real woman or look like a real man. The superficial issues are slightly different because women want to look like real women. They don't want to look like real men. So that's obviously different. But the fundamental issue is the same. It's the desire to, ironically, to connect. In terms of fitting in, but what's happening when they starve themselves, of course, or when they have any kind of eating disorder, is they're actually disconnecting from their own needs and from other relationships.
Is it a disorder when they're trying to bulk up? Because we hear about these young guys trying to bulk up and be so muscular. I think more so than we hear about them trying to be thin, although that is an issue in and of itself.
Right. Well, it's sort of they go together because in terms of bulking up, you know, you don't want any body fat on your body. So in terms, it's eating disorders because not just starving yourself. When I say, you know, you're eating certain foods only at certain times so that you know, you don't get any body fat on your body. And that for a growing adolescent boy is tremendously unhealthy. So even the bulking and the starving themselves, it's not starving themselves, it's just eating particular foods that won't allow them to get any body fat on their bodies. So it's the same fundamental problem as with girls.
There's a tweet here from Paul who says, well, with all the shirt optional men that we just saw, you just pointed to, in movies and music videos, and extremely popular hot guys the young ladies talk about, it's an expected result that the young lads would try to fit the build they think is pleasing to their peers. Now, Simon, in our hangout, I want to go to you because I want your thoughts on this and whether or not you think that that's a reason that men have body image issues.
In terms of like getting body image issues, it really varies dependent on the person that you're looking at. I wasn't really influenced by the media as such. I was sort of bullied into trying to control what I eat. But a lot of people who I was in the clinic with, they were heavily influenced by the images that they saw on TV, in magazines, in adverts. You know, it's really highly variable.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. I mean, I just want to stress that eating disorders are very complex psychological illnesses, and there are many, many factors at play here. So, you know, it's not that somebody looks at an image in a magazine and instantly develops an eating disorder, but of course the media is a huge influence. There can be family issues going on, there can be other roots of the eating disorder, past trauma, low self-esteem, depression, all of these, anxiety, all of these can be root causes. So we can't just you know, blame the media in a simplistic way, but we absolutely need to hold media accountable for the role.
Niobe, speaking of that, you know, I mean, I'll give you the internet and how that has really accelerated how people see themselves and see others because of the availability of these images. But hasn't this issue kind of always been around, and in terms of it with boys, are we just now recognizing it, or is there really this escalation of boys and body image problems?
Well, you know, it's interesting because there's sort of mixed research on it. So some research actually suggests that we've had this problem for a long, long time, but we're now starting to pay attention to it, and boys are starting to get more attention. Others are saying actually problems that boys are facing across the board, and we're not talking just about body image, we're talking about problems with boys in schools, problems with boys in violence, that all of these kind of symptoms of boys' problems are increasing in a sort of global society. So the question, I think that from listening to boys, you know, really since the mid-'80s, it seems like the problems are getting worse, and the pressure to be a real man in the sort of most constrained way possible, you know, look exactly fit, look like your stereotypic macho man, you know, be emotionally stoic, be invulnerable, don't need relationships, all those kinds of things. In my studies, it seems to be getting worse, that there's more and more pressure for boys to be, you know, I mean, it's just such a bizarre thing that we request our boys to not need anybody, to not need relationships. You should want relationships, but you shouldn't need them. Well, we're human beings. Everybody needs relationships. That's who we are as human beings. But we raise boys to think that they don't need them, and then we're surprised when they act out, whether they act out through, you know, basically abusing their bodies, or acting out in terms of violence, or acting out in all sorts of ways. And I think we really need to look at what we ask of our boys in our cultures. That is it healthy? Is it healthy what we ask of our boys?
Yeah. You know, Alan Aragon, I want to go to you and all of our viewers. Take a look at this website I've got pulled up here. It's called bodybuilding.com. This is one way that boys are reaching out to boys. This is sort of a teen forum for bodybuilding. Alan, you're actually a moderator on this site. I want to pull up a couple of these. Like, here's a boy who says he's going to drink some Muscle Farm Assault today. He's talking about, you know, trying to bench more than he's benched previously. And you're a highly educated nutrition expert. You know how to handle these young boys. So thank goodness you're moderating this forum. But there are plenty of forums out there who aren't moderated by someone like you. What's the danger in misinformation or just bad advice really getting spread around these kids?
Well, misinformation being spread through bodybuilding circles is a huge problem. It's even been coined the term bro science, because it's from one bro saying to the other, hey bro, you got to take this, bro. You're going to get huge natty gains over the next week, bro. So it is a tremendous problem, and there's a wide range of adverse effects that can be incurred by the young folks getting advice from forums that aren't properly moderated.
Well, Abdullah here on Twitter is also weighing in. He says a lot of this has to do with consumerist culture or corporate capitalist culture. So Ryan, I want to go to you and see if that segues into Hollywood culture, because in your job, if you don't look your best, you may not get a job.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, us as actors or models, we are selling ourselves. So it depends on how we look and how we see ourselves. So if you're wanting to bulk up and have that 6-pack, 8-pack, not eat anything, that's how everyone else is going to see you. And if you lack that confidence of, you know, being able to look a certain way, it's going to show. And unfortunately, out in Hollywood, there's a lot of people who are just very dangerous with it, whether it's with not eating, drugs, alcohol. It's all over the place, unfortunately.
Matt Wetzel in our Google Hangout, you're an activist, you're a recovered anorexic. You know, typically, at least for girls and women, we've got the media, we've got Hollywood, and we've got especially other women putting pressure on us for this perfection. What do you think is driving this need for perfection with the men? Where's the pressure coming from?
That's a good question, and I'm always hesitant to talk about the media too much, because it's really easy to point to it and try and think that there is a causal link, and there's certainly correlations, and you know there are plenty of studies showing that thin media ideals lower body image satisfaction and normalize anorexic bulimic behaviors. But when we're talking about eating disorders, like compulsive overeating is also an eating disorder. It's two sides of the same coin. And if you look at compulsive overeating, men make up about 1/3 of people that suffer from it versus like 10% of male anorexics. So it's a bigger problem than anyone realizes. In terms of what might be influencing males more, speaking from personal experience, much like Simon said that he wasn't influenced by media or things like that. You know, I've never been into bodybuilding. I've done some running post recovery, you could say. You know, now that I'm healthy, but for me, I got sick following a bout with depression. I had a bit of a massive depressive episode. I wasn't eating or sleeping well, and the two kind of perpetuated one another. And the worst of it didn't begin until someone asked me, how much weight have you lost? Because it was clear that I had, and I hadn't weighed myself, and it was probably the worst thing I could have done.
But did it drive you to keep losing weight? Because I know just from personal experience with anorexic friends, it's almost an incentive when someone says, "Oh, have you lost weight?" They're like, "Oh, yeah, I have. I'm going to keep doing this." Was that how you processed that?
Sort of. You know, people that knew me well, my close friends, they could tell something was wrong and they were concerned. Meanwhile, coworkers were complimenting my weight loss. And that was definitely a mixed message. And we do have a culture that promotes weight loss as always a healthy thing, always good. They equate weight loss with health. And that's simply not true. For some people, getting healthy might involve weight gain. But you never hear someone complimenting your weight gain unless they're... If you did, you'd probably think that they were trying to be rude.
It's interesting that you say that. Well, in the search for solutions, which our community seems to be turning to now, Rosalie says, how can we dismantle this idealized version of what men and women should look like? Is this conversation futile without the cultural buy-in? Simon, I want to go to you because you turned to YouTube to find a solution for a way to help other people. Tell us about what you did.
Well, yeah, as of the beginning of this year, I decided to make my New Year's resolution to try and help other people that, you know, might have an eating disorder, whether it be anorexia, bulimia, even obesity, because, you know, people are trying to reach out to me. And originally, I just wanted to give people a bit of an update ever since the documentary aired that I was in 2007. But after that, people just started sending in questions to me, so I thought I should start making a sort of question and answer session. And it sort of escalated from there, really. It's been really great. I had the idea in mind to, you know, if I could just help one person, that would be great. But I'm helping hundreds, and it's really, really good.
Simon, is there a particular type of question you see more than others?
I mean, the main question that I'm getting from people is, how do I reach out? And it's mainly from men who are asking me this because, you know, as you guys were saying earlier, men don't really feel that they can reach out because it makes them look weak. And
exactly,
if they can sort of dismantle that and just get over that barrier, it is the best thing that they could do for themselves. Right,
that's right. Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do, Niobe.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the fundamental issue, and this is really coming from the data of hundreds and hundreds of boys since the mid-'80s and from all over the country in the States, and we're also doing studies in China now too, is really boys, you know, understanding that boys need and want relationships, closeness, like girls and women do, and if we address their, to put in jargony terms, but meaningful, their relational needs, if we actually foster their relationships, both their friendships, their relationships with family, their relationships with girls, etc., they will be in healthier places. When you are disconnected, and this comes again from the research, when you are disconnected from others, you oftentimes are disconnected from yourself, so to speak, meaning you do things that hurt yourself because you don't feel in a loving, caring community. So it's really addressing the fundamental need for connection, addressing boys' needs for connection will really help to address many of the problems we see in boys, including body image problems and eating disorders.
Alan, how do you address that fundamental need, really? I know it's something you've got to deal with on a daily basis.
Can I respond? Well, or should you want? Yeah, okay.
Go for it.
I think I'd love to hear the other panelists' thoughts on this. But what we've been doing is trying to talk to principals and teachers and school innovators and school reform people, as well as parents. I talk to hundreds and hundreds of parents every year. Thousands, in fact, of really trying to say we need to be thinking that the goal of raising our children and educating our children is to help make them, you know, connected beings. Again, I'm sounding a little jargonish, but, you know, to help them make good connections, good friendships, good relationships. And, you know, it's interesting. I'm a developmental psychologist, and we still define maturity exclusively as gaining independence. We should also define maturity as having quality relationships, because that is really the essence of what makes us happy and what makes us thrive in the world. And so if we do that with boys, the research shows that we will have fewer problems with boys in terms of if we really address those needs.
Well said, Niobe. Alan, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, fostering quality relationships is foundational, and I have no disagreements with that whatsoever. I think that, well, this might be a bias coming from my end, career-wise, but nutrition is a huge part of how young men define themselves and develop themselves, and there's a lot of misinformation that's constantly just trotted out in the mass media about this diet or that. I think that just simply educating the public on those dietary issues is hugely important. Like, we'll take for example the paleo diet. Currently, it's this fad that has people cutting out entire food groups, cutting out dairy, cutting out grains, cutting out legumes, cutting out, just going to extremes with exclusionary tactics to supposedly adopt this optimal diet, when the evidence behind that is just so scarce, and it's a lot of it is based on speculation and imagination, and it just drives people to extremely unhealthy relationships with food based on a dearth of scientific evidence.
Claire, we've got about 30 seconds left. We'll obviously pick this up in the post-show, but in terms of solutions, where are you headed with this?
Well, I think, you know, what's most important in terms of overcoming the stigma is hearing personal stories, like Matt's and Simon's. And I really applaud their bravery in coming out and talking about their experience, because that's what young men need to hear. They need to hear that they're not alone. And at the National Eating Disorders Association, we're really trying to provide those resources with our hotline and our click-to-chat function on the site.
And we'll hear more about that in the post-show, so please join us at stream.aljazeera.com. Hi, welcome to the Streams Online Post Show. I'm Lisa Fletcher. Today we're talking about boys and body image. I'm joined by Claire Misko, Niobe Way, Alan Aragon, Ryan Salonen, Simon Metten, and Matt Wetzel. You know, one of the questions that we want to address in the Post Show is treatment for men and women with eating disorders equal? Last September, an article about men and anorexia in GQ magazine said of the 58 residential treatment centers in the U.S. that are listed in the Alliance for Eating Disorder Awareness's 2011-2012 guide, 25 clinics, less than half of them, admit men. Matt, I want to direct this question to you. You are a recovered anorexic, you're an activist. Is there an inequality in treatment?
There definitely is. I believe Remuda Ranch in Arizona, they have one of the highest success rates of any facility in the country for treating eating disorders. And they are strictly female. They had a male wing, but they had to close it because they didn't have enough patients. But we're talking a minority within a minority of a minority. You know, men are already less likely to seek help, especially like professional help for a problem. And then what happens to men and boys when they go looking for resources? And the majority of websites, blogs, books you find in bookstores or online either mention women specifically in the title, or they feature women on the cover, even if they have a gender-neutral sounding title. So I think the overall eating disorder recovery culture that has sprung up in part because of the internet. You know, the National Eating Disorders Association has only existed for about 10 years. So in terms of this being a well-known public thing, we're still pretty new in terms of other diseases or problems that affect people in a serious way. For me personally, when I was sick, I was in college, and there was one eating disorder group that I saw advertised at my school. And the flyer did say for women facing eating disorders. But do you know how many websites or books I had checked out that used predominantly or exclusively female pronouns? It didn't really faze me that it was going to say that. So took me a month to work up the courage to go over to the other campus where the meeting occurred. And I walk in, and they clearly, I didn't know where I was going, and this woman asked if she can help me. I hand her the flyer. She disappears, and they're like, you know, we think we can help you, but that group is only for women. And they had no idea what to do with me. They were not expecting someone who was not a woman to come looking for eating disorder support. So,
Niobe, does treatment for men and for young men and boys have to look different in every possible way? I mean, he even mentioned, you know, a treatment facility that had closed because there weren't enough guys taking advantage of it.
Yeah. So absolutely not. Basically, again, it goes back to we have to see these problems, that the fundamental issues, and I'm not claiming it's one issue because that's too simplistic, but the fundamental set of issues that boys and girls are facing that leads them to do bad things for their body are fundamentally the same. So I would say the treatment, certainly the treatment in terms of addressing specific challenges that girls have versus boys would be important as part of the treatment. So I don't think it has to be, you know, I think it's better actually to divide boys and girls up in terms of the treatment, because I think they're dealing with somewhat different issues sort of on the surface. But the fundamental issues of low self-worth, of feeling disconnected, of feeling there's not a lot of self-love going on oftentimes, they have difficulty reaching out, that's particularly true for boys. Those kinds of things really need to be addressed for both boys and girls. So I would say the only thing that differs for boys is that comment that a lot of people have said on the panel, which is that boys do need more help than girls in terms of learning how to reach out, because they've been trained that if you reach out, you're weak. And so boys have a lot of resistance to reaching out. So I would say that would be the main difference. But otherwise, it should be very, very similar in terms of fundamentally dealing with why are they not loving themselves.
Well, Matt, and following up on what you just mentioned about the differences that men and women face and in trying to get treatment, you recently had a blog post where you talked about your problems with the word manorexia, and it was just in a headline in a piece that interviewed you on. We tweeted that out, it's up on my screen here. We tweeted that out to our followers, and we got this response, someone that agrees with you. A term like that, meaning manorexia, assumes that it's a disease that afflicts women only, that men's afflictions are somehow different or weird. So can you tell our audience what your problem with the word is and what you find wrong with it?
Sure, I have a lot wrong with it, and certainly not to speak negatively of any media that has used it in the past, because I think sometimes it's just an honest mistake buzzword. But if you think about it, it almost sounds like a pun. You know, there are so many You know, we were talking about bro science earlier, like dude divorce, bromance. It sounds like a pun for like frat boys, and it's really upsetting because once someone has an eating disorder, there's not a whole lot that separates them from another patient, regardless of their sex or their gender, or their sexual orientation or their age. The things that they're dealing with, the problems occurring within their body, the risks to their health, the potential for serious life-threatening problems is the same. And a term like manorexia makes it sound like a joke. And it also, one of the main things that I promote in my writing is gender inclusivity, not gender neutrality, because I think there is value in the way that your sex or your gender influences how you're treated by people, how you may get sick and how you get better. There's value in that, but we need a recovery culture that acknowledges that doesn't just turn to women because they're a population of convenience, because they make up 90% of the people affected.
Claire, National Eating Disorders Association, you've got the Proud to Be Me campaign. One of the things that you teach people is how to be media literate.
Right.
What do you mean when you say that, and why is it so important in this context?
Well, we do get so many messages from the media about perfection. And, we've talked for a long time about how girls are exposed to this completely unrealistic, unattainable body ideal. But we also need to be talking about how boys are exposed to those images as well and how that affects them. When we look at images on billboards and in magazines, we've talked about how women's hips are slimmed with Photoshop and their thighs are trimmed with Photoshop. But what we also have to understand is when we look at images of men, six-packs are created with Photoshop, and V-shaped chests are created with Photoshop. So, this isn't just about, what you can do at the gym to achieve this body. These are completely fabricated images. They're fiction, and, to compare ourselves to them is toxic. It's really, really unhealthy. So, what we're trying to do is, A, educate young people about this fact so that when they see these images, they have an understanding. They can look critically at them and not internalize this idea that I should look this way, that there's something wrong with me that I don't look this way, when in fact the problem is with the culture and the completely ridiculous messages about perfection that we're getting in our culture.
Which is what's great about your message, which is proud to be me.
That's right.
On that note, thanks to all of our guests for joining us today. Great discussion. On Tuesday's program, facing constant death threats, she lives her life on the run. She is the author of a powerful blog that boldly documents the raw realities of Mexico's drug war. We have the first ever Skype interview with the woman behind Blog del Narco. Until then, we'll see you online.